To the Men's Lifeline Academy. We help men improve their lives, get their dead heart beating, and help them to shine and rise above. And today, I got Danny Nelson. Danny is a steward, and he'll help you become more faithful in your stewardship today. And today, he's going to tell us about the habits he developed so he could be a man of action. So, Danny, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Zach. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to meet you. Been following you recently. Love your content, how you're trying to teach people how to be faithful, how to be good stewards of their money, their time, their spirituality, and how they can just take one extra step to reclaim themselves. So, Danny, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Zach. I'm a I'm an accountant by trade. I also do life insurance and disability insurance. But more broadly, we'll talk about my stewardship framework later. But
Hmm.
just sort of going in that order. I'm a child of God. I'm a Christian. I'm a follower of Jesus. That's the foundation of my life, and it informs everything else. So it's good to start with that. I'm also a husband and a father. Been married 20 years this coming December
I was
with
thinking
four
about it there.
children.
Congratulations. 20 years is a huge milestone.
Thank you. Thank you. Um, and like I said, I have four children. They're all between the ages of in about 2 weeks,
Oh,
through 16. So boy, girl. They're 16, 14, 12, about to be 12 and about to be 9. So
wow. How about your odds?
um, that's right. That's right. In hindsight, we thought we would do the Narnia kids because they're boy, girl.
Oh.
But we're kind of glad naming them after them. We thought that would be fun, but in hindsight, we're glad we didn't. We went with Lord of the Rings names. So
Hey, there you
yeah,
go.
yeah.
So you got
Um,
Aragon in there or something?
so our oldest son is named Strider.
Strider, okay. Which one was that again? I've seen the movies, but I can't picture.
He's Aragorn. That's his name before he's Aragorn.
Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Is
Yep.
that from the books?
Well, no, if you go back and watch Fellowship of the Ring,
Yeah.
you'll meet Strider. He's sort of he's the guy that becomes Aragorn, and he's the Return of the King. And
Oh, okay, I have to go back and
yeah,
check that out.
yeah, and if you want me to round it out, our daughter's named Eleanor after the Eleanor flower.
Mm.
Um, Samwise Gamgee finds
Yep.
the flower. It's the prettiest flower he's ever seen. He actually names his daughter Eleanor after the flower. And then we have Thomas Beren. So Beren is actually a story within the story in Lord of the Rings. You can find him more in the Silmarillion, and then our daughter Rose is named after um, Rosie Cotton, who Sam marries.
Oh, okay.
So quick little nerd out on Lord of the Rings and my kids' names.
Hey, nothing wrong. I mean, they were probably one of the, most fantastic movies. We really can't say either of the sequels were bad because they're all really good.
That's right. That's right.
Aren't you excited about the new Gollum movie coming up in whether it be next year or what have you?
I'm always a little hesitant to get excited about new Lord of the Rings projects because you don't know which way they're going to go. But my son has researched it, and he's hesitantly excited about it. So yeah,
All right.
yeah,
So let's go back to being like the steward. Let's go back to a little bit more about who you are. So you got four kids.
yep, yeah. So who I am. So yeah, I talked about being a Christian,
Yep.
being a husband and a father, and then vocationally, I mentioned a little bit beforehand. I'm an accountant focusing on taxes. So I do a lot of tax compliance, a lot of tax planning. Um, and I also have incorporated recently, just as my career has gone along, I've wanted to more and more service the needs of my clients. And one of the ways that I've done that is by expanding into life and disability insurance.
Mm.
And I've got great partners that help me draw up cases for my clients that are interested in that sort of product. My heart is really in that area is to always do what's right for the client.
Right.
And a lot of accountants stop at compliance with the tax code, and I've always wanted to go further than that. Now I am. So That's vocationally what I do. And also, even more broadly, I offer stewardship consultations, which is something that I offer for free right now. But I let people go through an application process and let people sign up that are good fit or are a good fit for that consultation. Um, what else? So after vocation, then we get into resources, and we could talk all day about how to handle our resources and steward them well. So that's me in a nutshell.
Wow. So going from a tax guy who's going beyond, tax prep and doing taxes and, insurance and everything to now wanting to do some consultation how to be a steward. So I guess that's always the question. How would you define being a steward? Because there's a lot of times it's really associated with money, like being well balanced in your money, taking care of it, make sure there's enough money, whether you have an emergency fund, a vacation fund, or something like what have you. But how would you define like a stewardship?
That's a great question, and you kind of hit on what concerns me about people's view of stewardship is that it's focused on how we handle our money, how we handle our finances. And some people, when they hear stewardship, might just think budget.
Sure.
Stewardship is having a budget, and that's the end of the line. But coming from a Christian worldview, everything is about stewardship. Um, what we've been bought with a price. We're not our own, and everything about us, from our minds to our bodies to our relationships, are all they're not ours, right? They're
Mhm.
a gift from God to steward well. So everything is about stewardship. Kind of like everything is about worship when you're a Christian. I mean, you could view it's sort of the same thing. You can view life through the lens of stewardship or worship. It's all focused on how we're handling our our resources, our relationships that come from what God has given us. So, stewardship for me is every aspect of my life, from the moment I wake up. What am I doing with my time? And the trap that you can run into is, okay, why am I looking at life through the lens of stewardship? Am I
Okay.
doing it because, you know, am I doing it to gain righteousness, or am I doing it out of an outflow of appreciation for what Christ has done for me? And it's really important to keep that distinction at the forefront, because we can, I work off of checklists, as you can imagine, as an accountant.
Right.
um, Processes are great, but they often involve a lot of checklists, and you can feel like, as you're going through a checklist, that um, that you're you're becoming a better person. And maybe you are, in a sense, but you're not becoming more righteous. You're not becoming more acceptable to God.
Hmm.
So if we're looking at this through a Christian worldview lens, we're never becoming more acceptable to God. We're always honoring God by doing what we're supposed to do, by stewarding well what He's given us to steward. And at the end of the day, that mindset is more of a mindset of joy. So we're going through this checklist
Hmm.
because we love our Lord, and we love doing the things that He loves us to do.
So what would kind of go on your checklist and how long do you make it? Because I know a lot of times when you make it so daunting, let's say a checklist of three, more manageable. If you make it like a 10, it's like, well, how did I get this all done?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's one that I struggle with almost daily.
Okay.
Um, you know, I have so there's two kinds of checklists. There's the repetitive checklist. There's the checklist that wipes the slate clean every day. So I have a morning routine, and I go through that checklist every morning, most mornings, right?
Hmm.
And that checklist resets itself every day. And it just helps me keep on track of, these are the habits that I'm trying to form. So this is the checklist I go through to support establishing those habits. And the other kind of checklist is the to-do list.
Hmm.
And it has everything on there that we need to get done throughout the day. Maybe we're not going to get it done today. Maybe it's going to be something that happens a week out or a month out or a year's out, right?
Hmm.
If we have long-term goals on our checklist, on our to-do list, then that's going to take a long time to accomplish. And it's easy to feel overwhelmed, especially for me, during tax season. I often get a sense of overwhelmed that's really hard to overcome. You referenced dealing with an overwhelming sense of obligation that comes
Right.
from a checklist, and that can get very real. And it's really important in those times um, to choose what's most important. Um, there's a saying, and I've heard it attributed to Jonathan Edwards, although I haven't been able to confirm it. Is you always choose what you want the most,
Oh,
right? And if I've spent a lot of time thinking about that, and I think it's true. And I think if it's true, then figuring out what you want is really important. Otherwise, we're going to go on autopilot to choose what we want, right? We're going to let our
right.
subconscious choose what we want. And that's not always advisable. Most of the time, not advisable, right? Just doing what comes naturally isn't probably going to get us isn't going to get us to our long-term goals. So I'm kind of chasing a rabbit here, but I think I'll circle back to answering your question. Another thing that I've heard that I really like applying to this question is we live in an age where we talk about having priorities,
Hmm.
and I've read somewhere, I can't reference it. I could probably go find it if you'd like to put a reference in the show notes or something. But
Yeah, absolutely.
before this digital age, people spoke not in terms of having priorities, but having a priority.
Okay.
What is your priority? Not what are your priorities? And that almost sounds like a distinction without a difference, but I think there's an important distinction there. Having one priority that guides you is can help you inform what on your overwhelming checklist or to-do list needs to be addressed next.
No, that makes sense because if you're focused on so many different priorities, you can be so distracted by having to complete everything at one time or the feeling the need to complete, which goes kind of to an emotion, right? You feel like you have to do everything and get all this done, which becomes that to-do list, that checklist, with the notion of if you don't get it done, what did you do in the day? Versus having a priority, just having a singular focus can help you drive in. That's why a lot of times people say just focus on what's important and pressing at this time.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And another, if you want another to-do list tip that kind of goes along with what you just said, is I reference tax season because that's
Yep.
when my to-do list is the most overwhelming. Is I can spend a lot of time prioritizing 50 different things on my to-do list,
Mhm.
but really, like, thing number 5 through 50, if I've got 1 through 5 prioritized, the relative importance of things 5 through 50 doesn't really matter.
Hmm.
Go ahead and get started on 1 through 5. Just start doing. There's there's a huge debate in the business and self-improvement and whatever worlds between thinking and doing. You'll hear people talk about um, taking action. Just take action on whatever you're doing. And what they're speaking to is people that are overthinking things,
Right.
right? But we need a healthy balance between thinking and doing.
Correct.
Doing without thinking leads to bad results too.
You got to
But
have a strategy. That's something that's not always focused on is having that strategy, having a plan. And that's why a lot
that's
of times
right.
people also like we plan to succeed, we don't plan to fail.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
But yeah, and a lot of times we know what the three things in our to-do list should be. Um, and a lot of stuff gets on there. If you read, Stephen Covey and Seven Habits, he's got the four quadrant to-do list in
mhm.
there. We know to knock out the things that are not important, get those off your lists and move on. But we all have a good sense of what the first three things on our to-do list should be. So that's when you take action, is when when those three things, what those three things are, heads down, get them done.
Yeah. And the question is, and I know you attributed to having like the resources to stewardship to make sure it's important to you to have that singular priority.
Hmm.
So if it's the first thing is getting up and let's say brushing your teeth, that's your priority in that time, in that moment.
Hmm.
And then getting ready for the day, making the bed, and stacking up also with Stephen Covey, stacking up those wins.
That's right.
And doing this would go more to James Clear, but also sometimes doing a call out. Like, what are you going to do next? If you ever read
Mm.
his book, James Clear. Oh gosh, I'm blanking on it.
Atomic Habits.
Atomic Habits. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where he
Yeah.
talks
I've,
about
I've,
literally
I've
because
read.
they would do in Japan. They would in the train situation, and I'll never forget that part of the book. So that was the probably most clearest part of the book. Is there's a conductor, and then this guy who operates the train. The guy calls out, "Okay, what's the speed? 5 kilometers." Then it might be, it's still green, green, okay, go. Because that way you're not on autopilot. If you're calling things out and you're paying attention to what's going on, you begin to leave that autopilot, but it's just I just drive a train. It's like you hear all the time about people. It's like, I don't know how I got to work. I just got in my car and I just got to work somehow. I don't remember what did I
Yeah.
mean. I was paying attention. I was alert and everything, going all the right different routes, going the speed limit and things like that. But all of a sudden, I just popped up.
Hmm. Yeah. Another a lot to stretch that analogy, or maybe inform it.
Hmm.
One of the things that I do that nobody else I know does, but if you're having a hard time focusing on keeping on track with a to do item, um, I keep track of what I'm doing it's sort of a journal, but it's in an Excel spreadsheet, as you can imagine, right?
Right.
So I there's a shortcut. I actually use Google Sheets, so it's Control Shift colon, and it'll
Mhm.
put a timestamp in the cell that you're on, right?
Oh.
So you don't even have to type in the time. You just get used to typing Control Shift colon. It puts the time in the next cell beside it. You type what you're doing right now. All right. And the magic, if you will, behind that is you've stated um, concretely what you're doing right now,
Hmm.
and you can't if you adopt this habit, you can't do something else unless you put another timestamp and another thing that you're doing,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
And what that does for me is it keeps me focused. If my mind starts to wander, I tell myself that's not what you're working on. You're working on the thing that you typed in your spreadsheet. Works for me. If anybody else is struggling with that, maybe it's something you could try. You could write it in a journal if you wanted to. You don't have to use a spreadsheet like me.
Well, it's all about who you are and like what's tailored to you, what's gonna
That's right.
give you the best results, right? Because that's why everyone's a little bit different. So for some people, well, I can write the time in 2 seconds.
Yep.
But it's like, wow, I got a cheat code now. Now I can actually use what Control Shift colon. You said
That's right. That's right.
awesome.
Yep.
Just to make
Just
it.
another way to call out what you're doing.
But that's what's important is having a designated time to do something and getting it done. That way you're recording yourself. That way nothing got done is if you go back and review, then it becomes, wow, look at that. At 6:50, I got up and got ready. I typically get up and ready at 7 o'clock. That's 10 minutes. Wow, what am I gonna do with these extra 10 minutes?
Hmm. Yeah, and you'd be surprised. I've been doing this 24 hours a day. I don't do it in a lot of detail, but I've been doing this 24 hours a day for about 8 years.
Oh wow.
And so I have as you can imagine, I have a lot of data about what I spend my time doing, right? And that can be very informative. We You don't know where your time is going until you track it, um, and that can just having that knowledge of what you're doing and how you're spending your time can be very valuable. So even if you do it for a week, it can change your life.
Yeah, and that's what's incredible too, is because people don't realize how much time they spend, especially these days, scrolling on, Facebook, Instagram, the reels and things like that of how much time they're actually wasting. And then but again, depends what you're using it for. If you want to be someone like on a podcast and you want to like yourself just take the limits and go beyond, then you have to really manage that time. Well, if I just spend the last 2 hours scrolling through media, what did I just do? I could have been focused on the stewardship, focusing on getting everything a little bit defined, a little bit crisp, a little bit nice. So, and that's how I kind of
Spending
want to
quality time with your family.
spending quality time with your family, especially. I mean, and you got 4 kids, and I'm sure each one of them wants your attention and
Yep,
to take care of them and to spend that quality time with them and your wife too.
that's right.
Because that's also one of major things too. You gotta pay attention to the wife and make her feel special and unique.
That's right. Yeah, in that so relationships is the fourth category in
Okay.
the stewardship framework. And when I talk about relationships with people, I talk about, if you're married, your relationship with your spouse, with your husband or your wife is the most important relationship in your life.
Right.
And yeah, your relationship with your children is important, but if you're not in right relationship with your, well, I'll just talk in my terms, with your wife, then you shouldn't be focusing on your children. I know that sounds harsh,
Mhm.
but the best thing, if you've listened to James Dobson back when he was in his heyday, he's one of the things he said is the best thing you can do for your children is love your spouse well. So
Yeah.
once, if there's something wrong or disordered or out of order with your relationship with your wife, that's your primary focus. Then turn to your children. Um, and it goes out in concentric circles from there, right? So the people in your house are the most important people in your life. So,
Right.
focus on your wife, focus on your children, and then it can expand from there. Clients, friendships, church community, your broader local community. It goes out from there, right? So we can, if we don't think about it, we can get those out of order as well. We can, you know, as you can probably relate, we can focus 24/7 on our clients and
Mhm.
never run out of things to focus on, and feel like we're doing something good when
Right.
we're neglecting the people that are living in our house with us. Um, yeah.
No, I think that's a good point. That's something that I think is getting touched upon a lot more now is really begin to focus in on paying attention to the people in the house, especially your wife. Let your wife go first and then your kids. Where a lot of people have been doing the opposite for so long, where they spend their entire focus is on their kids, all their hobbies, all their activities, their friend groups, getting everything ready where they kind of exhaust themselves. And then you do hear about this where all of a sudden the kid is 18, leaves home, and then the parents have to be like, well, now we have to get to know each other again. Like, I don't really know who you are. We spent the last 18 years taking care of
Mhm.
this kid and make sure the kid's okay, but then we weren't nurturing and taking care of ourselves. So I'm like, that's a good point because then you hear about how divorces just skyrocket,
Yep.
after being an empty nester.
Yep. Yeah, I'm determined not to let that happen.
Well, as we all know, intention is at the forefront. If that's your A priority, is not allowing to even ever mention the D word or anything like that,
Right.
then the focus then becomes on how can I make the relationship a priority? How can I take care of the relationship? How can I foster it? Really, that I really meaning a we, right? Because it's not
Mhm.
just one person.
Right. Absolutely. Yep.
So so obviously force family in your stewardship kind of class program. So what are the others?
The other, areas
Yeah,
of stewardship.
of course.
Yeah, so let's run through them again. So, these are sort of listed in a logical order, so we'll do bottom up, right? So,
Okay.
we talk about having our really, whatever your spirituality is, I say get that in order. I recommend Christianity. But
Makes
whatever
sense.
your spiritual leaning is, make sure that you've got that in order, right? Because,
Right.
from a Christian worldview perspective, if we're not in right relationship with the Lord, then nothing else really matters, right? That's the basis, the foundation for everything else. So we start with that foundation of our spiritual is our what's our spiritual health, and then if you've followed folks like Peter Attia, um, I'm blanking on the others, Huberman, sort of those
Yeah.
guys that are longevity focused. Uh, you know, Peter Attia brought this to my attention and it actually might have been Jordan Peterson, regardless of who it was.
Right.
The idea is the next plank above spirituality is our physical health. And you would think that might not be the next priority, but because we're if you're a Christian and looking at this from a Christian worldview, we are created physical beings, right? We
Right.
have bodies that God has given us to steward, so we take care of them well. But the next one above body is mind, right? So our mental health, and our mental health is best addressed when our physical body is supporting the health of our mind. Our brain is a biological organ, right?
Right.
It's not ethereal, it's biological. That's how God made us. We don't know how conscience works. We don't know how we don't know why we think the way we do. We know it has to do somewhat with what's going on in our brain.
Hmm.
It's probably more than biological, right?
Sure.
If we believe in a spiritual realm, but it's at least physical. Our brain is at least physical.
Well, you got all the
So
different parts of the brain that have a function.
exactly,
So when
yeah.
that function is aligned, you're able to think clearly and specifically and concisely. When the brain is out of alignment, whether something's not working properly or you're overloaded with your neurons and neuron pathways going different directions in different ways, you can be more distracted, which causes a lot of the nervousness and frustrations.
That's right. And to your point, that could be a biological factor.
Right.
Yep. So we've got our spirituality, we've got our bodies, we've got our mind is the third plank of the stewardship framework. Um, and then relationships. Now, relationships, you think about what's more important, but having a sound spiritual health, body health, and mental health leads to having a healthy set of relationships.
Hmm.
It's sort of the airplane metaphor. Put your own mask on before you put other people's masks on,
Ah, that's a good one. Yeah.
right? So if we're working towards having ourselves in order, this is always an ongoing process. But if we're working towards having ourselves in order, then we can be better equipped to focus on our relationships. So relationships is the fourth part of the stewardship framework. After relationships, we have vocation. I used to lump vocation and resources into one category. I broke
Okay.
them out because really vocation is you could from an accounting perspective, if I'm looking at an income statement, vocation is the revenue line.
Right.
It's all the things that support revenue coming into the household.
Which is
Now,
a resource. I can see why you lump them together.
there you go. Yeah. But all of our other resources are in the expense category for the most part.
Oh,
Right?
yeah. Food, shelter, water. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
hobbies, all of those things make money go out the door, not usually in the door.
Okay.
So,
That's a good
yeah.
accounting kind of tip.
So vocation is the next plank above relationships. And when I talk to people about vocation, it can go any number of directions because there's so many things that can be out of kilter there. Are we miserable in our vocation? That's probably something that needs to be addressed. Are we lazy in our vocation? Maybe lazy is not the right word, but are we stagnant in our
There you go.
vocation? Are
That's
we?
yeah, I like that word better.
Yeah. Um, and then are we missing opportunities? One of the things that I address when talking about vocation, especially in like a stewardship consultation situation, is how many streams of income do you have?
Mhm.
Because if you think about if I'm running a business and I have clients, if I've got one client that's 60% of my revenue, that's risky because if that client walks away,
Yeah.
I've lost most of my revenue, right? And a lot of people, sometimes you're in a house where both spouses are working, so you have two streams of income.
Mhm.
But a lot of people, I'm in this situation. My wife doesn't work outside the home. She doesn't have a revenue line in our household. She has some that she does, but they're seasonal.
Okay.
She teaches at our co-op and gets paid for that, but it's not it's sort of a 95-5 split, right?
Yeah.
95% of our income I'm out there generating, um, and if all of my income is coming from one source, that's risky.
It is.
People like to believe that having a wage or a salary from one employer is stable and secure. But I think more and more people realize that's not a secure relationship. That can end in a day.
Right.
Layoffs happen all the time, and
Yeah.
your company's thinking about their bottom line, not yours. Um, so there are rare exceptions out there. I was talking to a friend recently who works at a local company here called well, it's not a local company, but it has a local presence, Michelin. I'll give
Okay.
them a shout out because they were spoken of so highly. They they really invest in their employees, and when times are tough, they don't cut them loose.
Okay,
Is what I've
nice.
heard. Is what I've heard. I don't want
Sure.
to speak for them, but this is what I've heard from someone that works for them.
What
Is
what
that
kind of company is it?
it's a tire company.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they manufacture tires.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
and
everyone's gonna need a tire, so
right, that's
yeah.
true. That's true. But that's the exception. That's not the rule. Most
Right.
employers are thinking about their bottom line, and if it makes sense to them to cut you loose, they're going to cut you loose. Um, there's no loyalty from most employers to their employees. All that to say, that's that's something that I like to help people think through is how much it's we call it concentration risk. Too much income concentrated in one spot, and if that income dries up, where does that leave me? So I talk people through how do we develop other income streams um, that will get us will be a buffer for us if one of our income streams dries up. Now, getting
Right.
rid of your employer is a long process, right?
Oh, yeah.
And
It's
maybe
not
you love doing, if your vocation is such that you have to be employed to do it, then you're going to stay employed. But developing other income streams is really important in the vocation discussion. All right, so let's go through them again real quick. So we've got spiritual, body, mind, relationships, vocation, and then resources is number six.
okay.
So when you're talking about resources, that's when we start talking about budgeting, paying off consumer debt, all the financial advice guru stuff that you would normally hear. Let's just
Mhm.
talk about that and make sure we're doing that. And then um, then I even talk about, like household and vehicle maintenance. Like
Oh, yeah.
systems break down if they're not maintained. So what's your maintenance plan for all of your resources? I'm personally behind on changing my HVAC filter right now.
Oh.
so
So do you
so
have, like, a
that's
list of,
that's
like, when things need to be, like, repaired or replaced?
exactly. Yeah.
Oh, smart. I never thought of that. That's smart.
Yeah. So resources number six, and to round it out, because having six things on a list as a Christian is not the ideal. So you'd rather have seven, right?
Right.
So I round out the stewardship framework with rest as the seventh category, which
Oh,
is
yeah,
appropriate
typically people
for,
yeah,
yeah,
it's important to do.
yeah, 6 days of creation, seventh day rest,
Well,
six
7's
items in the
also a number of
stewardship framework.
completion.
What's that?
So 7's also a number of completion too.
That's right. That's right. Let's round it out and complete it with rest. So, which could be a subcategory in a lot of those places, right? and it really needs to inform all of them. We need rest in our spiritual life, and our body needs. We could spend a
Mhm.
lot of time talking about um, resting our bodies and how to do that appropriately. If you think you're sleeping well and you haven't thought about your sleep, you probably need to think about your sleep. Um, there's so much interesting literature out there about what effective sleep can do for you. I just I read an article recently about how effective sleep prevents, or not prevents, but well, maybe prevent is the right word, but there's a high correlation between good sleeping patterns and lack of cancer.
Oh, sure.
So, who'd have thought? I didn't think that. It does seem sort of intuitive once you start thinking about it, because sleep is a regenerative process, and
Exactly.
if
It's
if your
both a
body's
recovery of the body and everything. So, but again, we don't really know things until we may have an understanding that's effective. Like we all know sleep's important, but we don't necessarily know the why until you have people who thankfully have dedicated their life to studying and spending countless hours looking at data, going through countless studies and what actually sleep does. And that's why I know one person said this, like we all know it's not healthy to, eat and go to bed because it can contribute to weight gain.
Mhm.
But I saw a video where someone said another reason to look at it is also this. When after you finish a meal, your body is going to digestion mode, not rest and recovery mode. So your body doesn't really know what it's doing. Like that's a really kind of cool reason to know, and maybe that's why if you're eating a large meal and going to bed, you're not gonna get the best sleep because your body's like, hold on, I have to digest all this now and spend all the energy digesting versus restoring the energy levels.
Yep.
So I thought
I
that was kind
think
of a cool little tidbit.
absolutely, and I don't know if this if the data supports this, but I think in my mind, when so I don't do that anymore because I read something like that. And but I think the lie that I told myself about eating before sleeping is I'm going to give my body something to do so that my mind isn't racing. Like
Oh,
maybe my mind's racing because it doesn't have anything to do, because my body
right.
doesn't have anything to do. So I'm going to give my body something to do, digest, so that I don't have to think, so that I can fall asleep. And that so
Mm,
there's logic there, but it's
right,
faulty logic, right?
right.
So getting the real data, knowing how sleep actually works, how the body actually prioritizes what it does. If it has digestion to do, it's going to do that. It's not going to go into rest mode if it has to digest.
Exactly. And obviously there's also an emotion attached to it, some type of nervousness, I would say.
Hmm.
Is whenever you talk about people with racing thoughts, they're always thinking. So if you're a thinker and you're contemplating your next day, all the things you have to get done, or everything, what most people do, because a lot of times people struggle at night because you reflect on the day, and sometimes days actually turn to years.
Right. That's right.
And it can all happen in honestly, a matter of seconds. We have to be so conscious and aware and mindful of bringing things to attention so that we can feel at ease.
That's right. And it all has to do with what's your priority. Why are you doing the things you're doing? Um,
Right. No, and I'm glad that you kind of recognized that something wasn't going well and you took action, took that plan, took that Excel sheet to the limit to make sure that you're taking yourself. And I find what people use to be so cool and creative, whether it be a journal, whether it be an Excel sheet, whatever it could be to help keep yourself organized so that way you're not draining yourself of those resources and further having taxes on your life.
yeah. Thanks for working in taxes there.
Well, there's a book, Stephen M. R. Covey, who's the son of Stephen Covey, who wrote the 7 books of highly effective, wrote a book called The Speed of Trust.
Okay.
And so what he talks about in that book is, if you're adding value to someone's life, you're giving them dividends. If you're taking away the relationship, now you're taxing them.
Mm, yep.
So kind of a fun, unique way that kind of fits into this, especially with being an accountant. Hey, you gotta apply what people know best. If you know taxes, it just makes sense to use tax analogies because I'm sure there's a tax guy watching this video right now who's like, Excel sheet, oh man, that's a good idea. Then they get to be a numbers person. They're like, oh man, now I can put a timestamp. Now I can really structure my day to see if I'm wasting any time. You know, the times I'm sleeping, the times I'm awake, the times I'm doing things, maybe the times I'm doing nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, those nothing slots sneak up on you, especially if you count TV and scrolling.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's what a lot of people get in trouble is that it is something to really kind of factor into. And, you can kind of run us by this through your stewardship application process too, is how do you figure out the amount of time to rest, the amount of time to just enjoy maybe one TV show, maybe two at most, or the time it's going to take to create extra streams of income? Because that takes years to develop. If you're into real estate, I mean, that can, if you don't want to be debt because you follow Dave Ramsey, I mean, that could take a long time. And then if you follow the Robert Kiyosaki route and you just want to accumulate debt, then it's like that's also a risk, right? Could you mentally handle being X amount of money in debt,
Mhm.
especially when things, like you said, break down like cars? Tenants are not always going to pay for multitude of reasons.
Yep.
So, because it's like, or if you want a DoorDash, which again, if you want a DoorDash, cool, right? Do what you need to do to create extra stream income. Now you get mileage, wear and tear on the car, and how much money do you bring in per week that's going to help it, or is it just to maybe just help fund, whether it be since you're an account, your Roth IRA or your 529 for your, if you have kids and just want to have that extra $50 a month, you know, kind of look into all those kind of different routes too, but they take time.
That's right. Yeah. You mentioned, Ramsey versus Kiyosaki, figuring out the balance between, one of the mind things that we didn't really touch on was our mental health is one piece of the mind
Mhm.
category in the stewardship framework, but thinking through things is part of that stewardship category as well.
Right.
So, figuring out what you believe about certain things, setting aside time to think critically. Um, I believe that our digital society is is losing the ability to think critically. It's a skill that those that hone it are going to be in an advantage in the coming years. Um, you know, a lot of us are outsourcing critical thinking to AI, which is, I
Yeah.
think, a bad idea. So
Well,
thinking about what do I believe about Ramsey versus Kiyosaki, and it's a false dichotomy, right? It doesn't have to
right.
be one or the other.
Correct.
It's much more nuanced than that. Both of those guys are not very nuanced in their thinking, at least as they express it to the public. It's sort of their brand, right?
Yeah.
It's they're both very dogmatic about their positions, and that's sort of why people follow them. But like a lot of things, what you believe about debt is very nuanced, and how
Mhm.
how to utilize debt or not is a very nuanced topic.
Yeah, it is. And especially when they've dedicated both of their careers to that philosophy of what they found best works for them,
Hmm. That's
based
right.
on government, based on different standards of change. And I think from what I've kind of learned over the last couple of years and learning, diving deep into the financial literacy to better set yourself up, it's like, okay, well, okay, yes, there's tax benefits this way, but your whole life can be crumbled and or taking people to court, and just how much time do you want to waste? And if you want to outsource it to, let's say, a property manager, okay, you gotta give them, because I've looked into that, you gotta give them a split of the fee too. A lot
Hmm.
of times you're paying them the first and last month and 10%.
Yeah,
So
if you're managing a real estate empire, that's a different kind of stewardship category
oh
that
my
you have
gosh,
to.
that's like the biggest stewardship. Because like, because I know Dave Ramsey's talked about like developing so many different LLCs. So I guess
Mhm.
probably however many.
Yeah.
But that's the question, is what are you willing to do and the risk, especially if you want to steward it. Do you have the time? Because if you're focusing on all those properties, are you sacrificing your family?
That's
So I
right.
guess in one of the levels is, when it comes to relationships and resources, is which one's primary? And that's kind of going to your earlier point is which one's a priority? Is your family a priority? Because if it is, you're not necessarily going to be working all maybe like literally 100 hours a week to do everything that needs to get done to achieve what you want to achieve.
That's right.
So you have to really figure in. So how do you help people as they're stewarding their life and kind of helping coach them or consult with them to do the best they can to help steward what's the primary important versus having all these priorities like, well, I want to do this, and I want to do this, I want to have this amount of money and this amount of years, I want to have this kind of car, or want to make sure the car's completely covered. So how do you help keep people's focus? Because that's what's hard, right? If you're focused and driven, you're good, but when you lose that focus, it leads to downward spiral. So how do you keep people focused on their main priority?
I ask them questions about what's important. It's a
Okay.
it's a process that having someone to talk to, as you know, to ask you those questions is really valuable. So people that get it appreciate those questions, right? So
Right.
if they come, it's like doing a check-in. It's like, okay, how's it going in this category? How's it going in this category? Let's figure out are you focusing on the right thing? Which category are you neglecting? Um, so it's probably a thankfully a simple answer to a complex problem is just asking questions and bringing it to the forefront of our thinking so that we can adjust our focus when it's appropriate.
No, that's actually really wise. And just to add to your point would be because that way it leads them to say it. I've noticed in working with people pretty much my entire life, you can't necessarily tell people what to do. You
Mhm.
can encourage them and support them in their decisions and by asking questions. However, I noticed this which when they say that they want to improve and what's important to them, that's when the light bulb goes out because that way it doesn't become worse than deaf ears, right? Where you like keep saying the same thing to the person, like, yeah, yeah, I get it, I get it. And in your mind, you're like, you tell me they don't really necessarily get it, but okay. But that way, but when it becomes their words coming out of their mouth, then it's like, then there's that, oh, got
Mhm.
it, kind of moment. So I think it's important, like you said, just ask them questions, have them say literally answer the question. Because you can talk to them till you're blue in the face, but unless they
Right.
answer the question, then it's important to them, but then they begin to recognize the importance of it.
Yeah. Yeah, if you can get someone to identify the problem, if you can lead them to identify it themselves instead of pointing it out, it's much more powerful.
Yeah, and I just want to, really take time. I mean, you're up here early doing a podcast, so I just want to take some time to appreciate you for all that you've done. And as we kind of wrap up today, what's a word of advice you would want to give to somebody right now? Who really doesn't know about the stewardship, who is just kind of eager to learn, maybe they're an accountant, just someone who wants to get their life back in order because sometimes you do hear about this. I can manage someone else's money. I can take care of someone else so well, but my life is like I'm not doing what I teach. So how do you maybe like let's say help keep someone aligned? Like basically, what's in a minute or two? Like what's some words that you would want to give someone today?
I'll keep it pretty simple. I think I would repeat what I said earlier is
Hmm.
we always choose what we want the most. Think about that, see if you believe it. That would be my first suggestion is do you always choose what you want the most? Um, if anybody wants me to prove that to them, reach out to me. I'll be happy to walk you through why I think that's true. So we always choose what we want the most. Therefore, figure out what you want. Spend
Ooh,
some time thinking about what you want because if you don't identify what you want, you'll go on autopilot and you will you will choose what you want based on your baser instincts. Um,
well, you heard it
that's
from
my
Dan
advice.
himself. Choose what you want, go after what you want, and go after intentionality. Now, if you need some help, consultation, and you want to see if that you would fit his application, go check out Danny, for he will kind of help you, guide you, and see if you're the right fit for his program. and that will be in the description below. We always have the guests go first as we serve them for thanking them for coming on and taking time out of the day to come on the podcast. So go check his socials out, his X account, formerly known as Twitter, of course. Still like Twitter, just the sounds of it, but X marks the spot. So go to Danny where he'll help land where you want to go in the seven principles. And if your man needs a little bit of help and guidance, check out the Men's Lifeline Academy community. Everything will be in the description below. Go there, have a blessed day, and we'll